You never pigeonhole what you're going to do draft-wise, no matter where you're selecting, but this year, especially when you've got basically everybody back on defense, you filled your offensive needs. How much of a luxury is it that you can be pretty choosy and go really in any direction with this stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't get to turn in the picks that the other teams make, so we have to be flexible down at the bottom of the first round. And we consider it like taking, some of the high picks in the second round that we've had. So we feel good about our ability to do that. And we're not going to turn down good players at positions that might not be immediate needs. So we'll see what's left for us, and we think there's a good pool of guys. And so we think we've got a good chance to add somebody that can contribute now and in the future. What
do you think just of the class as a whole this year?
It's there's probably more players in this than maybe through COVID. So maybe the back part of the draft's a little deeper, but it's an average draft throughout. There's no real takeaways one way or the other. There's good players. It just depends on what's available to us when we're going.
When you talk about being able to contribute now and in the future, does that mean that guy doesn't need to be an immediate starter? He can't kind of work his way into a role. Is that an okay solution for you guys? Where you're thinking?
Sure. Yeah, I don't view us as having immediate starter needs. It will be up to the players and how they compete as to whether they play and how much they play and whether they become starters this year, next year. Yeah, we feel good about our overall roster and think we were able to fill some needs through free agency. And so, yeah, we're pretty flexible to taking guys for the future if that's what has to happen.
How important is age during the evaluation process? Because obviously there's some older players in this year's draft.
Yeah, we'll probably stay away from the 40-year-olds and higher group, but maybe coming out at 30 might be too much. Everyone else is certainly eligible in our minds. So whether they're a couple years older or not, sometimes that's a benefit. That they have a little more experience under their belt, maybe more advanced in their life skills, maybe more mature at that time. But age doesn't play a big part in the draft, really, for us.
Going back to what you were saying, where this 31 almost feels like a second-round pick. What is it about that second-round trade back that you guys have utilized so much recently that hits you so well?
Just opportunity. It's not something we go into the draft saying we are going to trade this second-round pick and move back. If the opportunity comes up and the board is the way we want the board to be, then we consider doing those things. So it's serendipity. It's happened for us and it's worked out in some cases. But you have to be flexible as the draft goes on. We're flexible, to opportunities that come our way, and we're also cognizant that if we move back, we might not get the guy we're looking for. So it depends on who's left, how strongly we feel about them, and how many of them are left that we feel strongly about.
How often are those kind of felt out ahead of time, and have any of them been a spur of the moment call that prompted a trade?
Most of them are spur of the moment calls that prompt a trade. As your pick is coming up, there's rarely trades done early. Before unless you have the first pick in that particular day. Most of them are as you're coming up on your pick, and you're fielding calls and you're trying to determine whether you want, and maybe we're the aggressor trying to move back, but that normally doesn't happen. Normally you field calls and for trade back scenarios. For trade up scenarios, you're normally the aggressor if you're trying to go get somebody.
That's 2 false starts on me, so I'm back to yours now. You mentioned not needing immediate starters, Duke, but how much do you want to add depth at corner on this team right now?
Yeah, I think anybody can look at our roster and see that we need some more guys there. The DB area is an area that we're going to look at. We're not going to force anything, so it's going to have to be the right guy at the right time. But yeah, that's a position where we can use some reinforcements for sure.
At the top of this draft, how much do you like the cornerback position as far as just the guys that are up there, what strengths they might have for your team?
Yeah, there's good players. There's very good players. I don't know how many of them we're going to have access to. If if you could tell me who's going to be there when we pick, I could help you with the rundown a little better. But there's very good players, and we'll see how they compare, to the guys that are left at the other positions. And like I said, we're not going to force something. We're going to take what's given to us at that point.
Luke, how important is it to have all the conversations about any player you might be taking, especially in the first 2 days, have that all done before you go into Thursday and Friday nights?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been doing the past month. We rank them by position. We talk through everything. We try to stack the position groups. Then we start talking, how to stack them regardless of position. And that's what we're doing. We did that this morning. We'll continue doing that this weekend, early next week, and try to solidify exactly how we stack these, player A versus player B, player C, and regardless of position. And sometimes there's big drop-offs in that stack. And you can draw a line and say, okay, here's where we drop off. And so if we want to get one of these guys above the line rather than below, and that can factor into whether you're willing to trade or not.
And how do you view the big board, if you will, versus positional breakdowns when you're looking at guys that could be available in the first 2 days?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Do you rank players, let's say from 1 to 300, and then take the highest player that's available regardless of the position? That's essentially my question.
Within reason, we put them in buckets more than ranks. So we won't leave a bucket of players, similar players that are very comparable in ability levels. We won't leave that bucket for a position of need down in the lower bucket. We try to stay in that group of players that we feel are worthy of the pick.
How valuable of a tool is mock drafting for the organization ahead of the draft, especially picking players
for us?
For you, yeah, not
like our mock draft or your all's mock draft?
Internal, that you guys do. Yeah.
I don't know. We really try to stay cognizant of the public perception of players. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. We go through an exercise and we try to mock 3 rounds. It's always kind of a worst case scenario because everybody in the room that gets to picks the ones we like, and so you end up with nobody you like in our mock drafts because we've taken them all before we pick. But we go through the exercise and it's almost like a worst case scenario for us. And if you feel good about who we end up in that exercise, you're going to come out of the draft feeling pretty good.
Y'all did pretty well in free agency, getting Chidobe and Eli, and you guys who were starters for you guys last year. Why were they able to be so successful? Were there certain traits that you guys saw that ended up playing out and coming to fruition on the field?
They like football, and they're prideful of their play, and they prepare, and they have the physical traits we look for. And they had some proven qualities, throughout the tape that we studied on them, proven NFL qualities. And like I said, the number one thing, you got to have the attitude to play in this league. You got to have the belief in yourself to play in this league. And the guys that we brought in across the board are successful guys because they have the right attitude and they have the right drive and the work ethic, and they enjoy playing the game. And those are important traits to us, and we look for that really in anybody we bring in.
You signed Ted Karras this offseason. Did you sign him specifically to be your starting center, or do you view his versatility and say, we'll decide where he goes after the offseason wraps up?
Well, Frank and Zach will decide where he goes, but we know he can play center and be a very effective center. We also know he can play both left and right guard and be a very effective right guard. So it was really a positive when he was interested in us and we were able to get that done. Yeah, it gives us flexibility, but that'll be decided by the coaching staff, and we'll see who all's in the building at that time.
When it comes to corners, is there a physical trait that maybe has become more important as the league has become a pass-oriented league?
A physical trait?
That you find that has grown in importance, or you find most important?
For what position?
Corners.
For corners?
Yes.
Speed's always going to be important, but the physical, you want guys that are long, that can disrupt receivers as they come off the ball. That's an important trait. You want guys that can mirror receivers, so they got to have quickness. They've got to have a degree of anticipation. Guys that can find the ball and play the ball in the air is a big thing. But ultimately, it comes down to how they play. Not everybody's going to be missing some measurable. You know, Mr. Perfect is never there, but you have to decide what you're willing to put up with and what the guy can overcome in his play. And if he's overcoming it in his play, then you feel good that he can continue to do that.
With O-line as well as corner, is arm length one of those things that's kind of non-negotiable? If it doesn't hit a certain number, that you guys aren't interested?
I negotiate everything, so there are no non-negotiables for me. Again, it comes down to whether the guy has been able to play effectively with whatever trait that he doesn't have. But yeah, is bigger better, longer is better, faster is better, smarter is better, tougher is better. So every inch you can get is a better analysis. But ultimately, it comes down to how the guy plays and can he overcome it where he's playing right now.
With the wide receiver market exploding the way it is, has that caused you guys to maybe kind of rethink your approach to that position at all?
I think our approach has been pretty good. I think we've got guys in the building who are signed up for multiple years that we feel really good about. I think we'll continue that. That's a position that we won't say we're not going to do something at any draft. I mean, when you have 8 picks, it's hard to go through a draft without hitting each position, and you know that's a position that we could hit again. And we found guys that have become really good starters in this league late in the draft, like Marvin Jones and so forth. So if there's a Marvin Jones available to us at in the later rounds, great, we'll take him. But it's a position that we always look at.
Do you think that, first of all, were you surprised the way it kind of took off this offseason, the wide receiver market, and do you think it's going to have a ripple effect outside of this building across the league?
You're just talking about what they're paid.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's getting paid a lot, and they're an important component of your team, especially if they're difference makers. So, yeah, does it surprise me that people are paying a lot for them? No, it doesn't.
You guys have a lot of key offensive players that are still on the rookie deals for at least one more season. How much is that kind of front of mind as you guys not only go through the draft but went through free agency as well, knowing that this time of window is going to be finite and probably wrapping up here pretty soon?
I don't know that we necessarily look at our time window as being finite or wrapping up here pretty soon. You know, we want guys that we draft to come in, be successful, and re-sign with us and be here their whole career. That's ultimately the design we have for every player that we pick up. And each player earns a little bit more with how they play, and you know it's our job to try to fit it all together, and that'll be something we do going forward. But in terms of changing the way that we operate there, we're going to always look to reward our guys if you can. Sometimes you got to spend the money internally, sometimes you have to spend the money externally, and maybe we're coming up on a path where a lot of the money is going to start coming to our internal players.
You've been around for a long time and experienced a lot of things, and even recently the AFC North title and things like that. But for what you do, getting the guy that you want, specifically with that first pick that you get, what is the feeling? How does that compare? How does that rank to winning championships, seeing the team succeed on the field for you? Just getting that guy that you knew you wanted, and there he's right there at the spot you have him.
I'll take the championships every time. You know, it's never about what Duke Tobin wants in the draft. It's about what we collectively assess the guy to be. I mean, and our assessments are collective. It's certainly not any one person. And we have a lot of guys working really hard, including our coaching staff, to assess these guys. Somebody ultimately has to say this one, not that one, and put a final grade on them and that. But we do it collectively, and so there's never anybody pounding their chest over a guy doing well on our team that he was my guy, because really when we draft a guy, he was touched by an awful lot of evaluators before he came in the building and signed off on by a lot of people. And so it's been a system that's worked well for us, and so I take the championship every time.
When you've had guys in recent years that are, you know, major impact players on this team, obviously losing played a factor in not getting the high picks, but do you feel a sense of accomplishment about?
Our scouting staff has a lot of pride in guys that succeed. They really do, and that's what they work all year for, is to stock our team with guys that'll come in and succeed at a high level, be recognized as that, and when they are, yes, every scout in our building, including me, takes pride in that, for sure.
How important is it to try and project, since there was so much talk last year about Zach creating the right culture, drafting players who fit in the culture? I mean, you've seen on tape what they're capable of doing, but you don't know until they get here how they're going to fit in culture-wise.
To some degree, yeah, we do a lot of work to try to figure that out, and that's one of the heaviest lifts we've got. Yeah, the tape's important. We grind the tape as much as we can, but we also grind behind the scenes to try to talk to as many people that have been around that player as we can possibly talk to figure out what really makes him tick. And ultimately, the guys that we've had success with over the years here and recently here are the guys that love football. They love the camaraderie of football. They love the competition of football. They like being in the locker room. They like being engaged with their teammates. They're playing because they love it. You know, if there was no NFL, they would still find a way to play football. And it's not, the driving force behind them is not what football brings to them. That's all great. Everybody recognizes it and everybody wants it. But the driving force behind them is actually the competition and lining up and playing the game. They love the game. And so if you can get to that, you can find a lot of really good fits for our team and for every team.
How does last year's draft on the offensive line, the 3 offensive linemen you picked, how does that impact this year's draft, and what do you view for them this year?
Yeah, we like all 3 of those young guys we took, and we think they all can develop and grow. We think we're going to have a good starting 5. There'll be some competition there. And then we think we've got really good backups that can come in the game and have proven they can come in a game and provide winning football for us. And so we're excited about the group. We're excited about those 3 that we drafted last year. We're excited about Prince and the development he made this year. And so it's I really like the way the offensive line's coming together. I really do. And so
there's not much. It doesn't. There's a lot. You keep so many guys, and there's a lot of guys already there that I think
correct.
Like it, I guess. How would you view it?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I answered with the wideouts, with the O-line, if there's a guy that improves us, that we like, that we think will have a good career in this league, we're not going to pass him, particularly if he's the best guy on the board. But, yeah, sometimes it does come down to a numbers game, and you've got to be cognizant of what you already have.
Sticking with the
Similar
O-line.
next question about culture. About 2 years ago, every player you drafted but one was a captain. And T. Higgins probably would have been, had he stayed there long enough. How important is being a captain? Do you put a lot of value in that specific reward?
Yeah. I think they're captains because they have the traits that we look for, so we try to uncover those traits, and lo and behold, when you find a guy that has those traits, they're captains. And so it might be a chicken and the egg type thing, but yeah, that's always a telltale sign. And each team does it differently. In college, some teams have game captains and not season-long captains. Some captains are appointed by the coaching staff. Some are voted on by their teammates. So you've got to kind of get to why is he a captain? How did he get there? But again, the guys with those traits normally will ascend if they're around long enough to be captains on their college teams.
Going back to Butch's question about the O-line, will the results of this year's draft impact or affect any way your decision to put the 5th year on Jonah?
The results of this year's draft, yeah, we're still talking through that, and I'm not going to break any news on that right now, but that's something that we have in front of us, and we're aware of it.
Duke, how do you view the safeties in this draft class?
How do I view them?
The safeties, yeah, specifically at the top of the draft.
Normally with my eyes. I I don't mean to be facetious. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but there are some safeties to be had in this draft. There always are. There's guys. You know, if you're looking for guys that are versatile, that could maybe play nickel and free safety, there's some of those guys. If you're looking for strong safety types that can drop down and play maybe a dime linebacker at times, there's some of those guys. There's some that can play both free and strong, which is good. Versatility in the safety area is one of the big traits that we look for, because we're multiple in how we play those guys, and we want multiple traits in them when we bring them in the building. So we think there's some guys that are good players. Again, I can't predict what's going to happen in front of us in any round, but yeah, it's a decent safety draft for sure.
Are there things about scouting that you had to do differently because of the pandemic the last couple of years that you've actually found have helped you guys now that things are back to normal? Are there certain things that you've actually said this is something we want to implement now?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. We do maybe a little more Zoom interviews with guys now that everybody in our building's comfortable with that technology, and so you can get a really good interview with a guy, spend an hour with him on a Zoom, have him talk football, maybe share video over the Zoom. So there's some technology components that we've been able to take advantage of and have used to get to know the kids a little more than maybe we otherwise would have.
With that being said, are there things that you can only glean from being in person that you can't through the virtual
Well, I think an
process?
in-person encounter is always a little more informative than an over-the-computer encounter. So yeah, in just about every way, the engagement with somebody is more real, and you can kind of feel the energy that is there a little more, the passion that the guy might have, and that you can't pick up, over a computer screen. So. If we're given the choice and we have the time, we would rather meet with them in person.
Last year, of course it made sense, before you drafted Jamar Chase, you talked to Joe Burrow. Is Joe Burrow involved in the draft process in any way this year?
Joe's a guy that I talk to a lot about a lot of things when things come up, and it's a little different scenario this year. It's a little less predictable, and I don't think Joe has the time, desire, or need to grade 400 prospects like all of our scouts. So, we value Joe's opinion, but we lean on our scouting department and our coaching staff for the draft.
Is there a position group in this year's class overall where you feel like maybe the talent runs a little deeper than some of the others?
That's a good question. I think there's guys everywhere. Each draft is weird in so much that sometimes there's a lot of players in one round that we grade, and then maybe 2 rounds where there's hardly anybody, and then it picks up again late. And so this year has those kind of peaks and valleys. So if we don't go here, we're probably going to have to wait until towards the end of the draft to address this position. And so we know that going into it. And I won't get into specifics on how we view each position here, but yes, this draft has some of those peaks and valleys, and some of those valleys that are important to us. We'll have to try to navigate around as the draft goes.
Is signing rookie free agents, college seniors, whatnot, free agents, also part of all of this process?
Sure. They're part of the evaluation process because they go through the same. We spend as much time evaluating a 7th-round player as we do a 1st-round player. I mean, our scouts watch the same amount of tape, spend the same amount of energy interviewing people around them, and we spend the same amount of energy talking about them as a group. And so the universe of players we feel is pretty well defined. We don't know who's going to be left over after the draft. But yes, we talk about strategy as the draft goes on, particularly late in the draft. And then we'll talk about maybe positions of importance for us prior to the draft, and maybe some positions where we have less numbers, that we want to attack that position, A, in the draft, and B, after the draft. But you kind of have to wait and see where you've drafted to really find out exactly what numbers you need after the draft. But it's something we think about a lot, yeah.
You've had success with non-combine players down through the years. What is the, you know, you talk about heavy lifting. What's the heavy lifting you have to do there, maybe compared to guys you've seen in the combine? Does a lot of it come down to the visit, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've put the same amount of work in those guys. We don't know who's going to be invited to the combine when we're out in the fall evaluating guys. And so as soon as the combine list comes out, that's always one of the first exercises we do. Who was left off? Who do we like that that didn't get invited? And yes, we put focus in on those guys, and a lot of times we try to bring those guys into our building here to A, get a physical on, which is important because we won't have a physical on them from the combine, and then B, get to know them a little bit, knowing that because they weren't invited to the combine, they might linger a little bit longer in the draft or maybe go undrafted. And so we want them to be comfortable with us, and we want to be comfortable with them. A lot of times, those are guys that we end up drafting late in the draft process.
How did your dad's success as a team builder impact what you look for in the draft?
Oh, my dad has impacted me more than anybody in my life. I mean, so I like to think the way that I am is because he was the way he was. So I've been watching him work for my entire life, you know, 52 years. I've been around NFL football and watching how he conducts himself and what he looks for in players and what he looks for in putting together a team. So, I mean, I like to think I'm just a mirror image of him, you know, less hair.
A lot of times when you're evaluating prospects, it comes down more to traits than production at the college level. What about kick and punt returner? Can you see a guy that hasn't had any experience doing it being one, or if you're looking for a returner, does he have to have experience in the college?
I would say that you wouldn't feel good about it if he's had no experience. You might believe that he could, but you're not going to know until you get him in your building and actually try him out at it. So it's a steep climb. If the guy's talented enough, they can make that transition. There's guys who have returned punts and kicks in the NFL that didn't do it in college, but it takes time, and it takes enough time to make the coaching staff believe that you are reliable, A, will catch it, and B, make the right decision with it after you get it. So it takes a little time. It's easier when the guys had 4 years of, you know, fielding punts in live game action. It's different than fielding a punt in a practice. Fielding punts when they're coming full speed and you've got no protection, you want to see that. If you're taking him just to be a returner, you want to see it on the college game before you feel good about him.
You've got kind of reliable punt returners on the roster, but maybe not a threat to take it to the house type. Do you consider that a need?
I'll let you tell those guys that. Yeah, we'll look at guys that can return. You know, we value the ball. You know, especially with our current team, we want the ball. We want our offense after the play's over to be running out onto the field. Now, if we can score, that's a bonus. If we can flip the field position, that's a bonus. But we believe in our offense and we want the ball, so that's the first priority with the punt return unit. And then whatever else they can get beyond that, that's great. But at the end of the play, we need the ball. And I think a lot of teams are that way. If we didn't believe we could move the ball or score, then maybe we would be trying to manufacture it in different ways. But if we can get a punt returner that scores, we'll take it. You know, if he scores and the offense doesn't get to go out there, we'll take that one every time. So we look every year for guys that have redeeming traits on special teams, not just the returners, but guys that cover well on punt team and guys that cover well on kickoff team in college. Those are traits that are important for guys that don't start on your team. So we spend a lot of time trying to uncover whether those guys have those traits when they walk in the building.
What traits do you value at tight end?
Well, I like big, fast, strong, and tough. I like guys that catch the ball when it's thrown to them. I like guys that can separate man coverage. I also like guys that can find the soft spot in the zone, which is a big part of what a tight end does. You know, availability to the quarterback. Does he have a natural feel to be available to the quarterback? Can he slide away from underneath coverage? Does he have that ability, and it's an innate ability to know where the opening is? I think if you can't block, it's very difficult to use you. I think you've got to have some degree of blocking ability. Otherwise, they'll just consider you a wideout and play you accordingly. So obviously the game has gone to a passing game, and so you would maybe say that the receiver type tight ends are a little ahead of just the blocking types, but you need those blocking types that they can make your offense work.
Everyone good? Perfect, thank you, Duke.